Hello, and welcome to the Joy CEO podcast. I'm your host, Lori Pine. So glad that you are here with me. If you are new, let me tell you exactly who this show is for. It is for the accomplished, the ambitious, the one who has built things, who's led people, who has made things happen. That is you, my friend. She is the one who sits in the quiet, persistent feeling that perhaps there is still something not quite right. Maybe something she is not fully living into the life that she is meant to live. And if that's you, you are in exactly the right place. And I mean that in a way as someone who has walked in those same shoes, led a $1 billion business, raised 2 boys, and was seeking something more, deeper, meaningful. If you are returning to the podcast, thank you. You know I love you, adore you, so glad to have you back. And, you know, this show really is where ambitious women come to lead bigger, live fuller, and finally give themselves permission to want what they actually want. Yes. So let's get into it. Do you think it's possible that you could be your own worst enemy? I mean, maybe. I know that is true for me. There are so many examples that I could give you today. They're in my personal life. They're in my personal relationships. They're in some of my thinking. But one place that comes to mind is how I was showing up in this really under-resourced team and being asked to do some really remarkable things and doing those, achieving those, breaking records, hitting sales targets, and feeling like exhausted, like a ragged doll. It was as though the performance markers just kept moving and the carrot kept dangling. And if I would perform these tricks, well, then I would get. And not that this is one of my finest moments, but I had an outburst in a management meeting. And I was just fed up. I wasn't polite. I wasn't gracious. I was not the quote unquote nice girl. And I just defended my people, defended myself, honored the work that we did, and really highlighted it. But I was direct, adamant, and the room went silent. Nobody was used to me speaking up the way I spoke up. I ended up getting some resources. It didn't take long. And what happened, though, is I spent probably a good week really ruminating about how I handled that situation and punishing myself for the outburst, even though it ended up working out. But I kept replaying it in my head over and over again. And my boss had even given me some feedback about the way I handled it, my tactics. But here's the thing. I had tried playing the game the way that the game was meant to be played, and it wasn't working. It wasn't until I actually put some fuel on the fire to say, here are the facts. Here how this team is over-delivering, even with fewer resources, fewer trade marketing dollars, fewer budget dollars in general. And yet we keep delivering. And this is grossly unfair of what's being asked, not just of me, but of the people who report to me, the people who are doing the day in and day out. And it really, came to mind when I had a client just in the last couple of weeks who shared a similar story. She was beating herself up. What she couldn't see is that her superpower is this ability to see big picture in a way that is incredibly strategic. And she works in really complex situations that require problem solving at the highest level. She's in sustainability. She's working on sensitive topics like conflict minerals, like child labor. And she's looking to see how the supply chain is operating and if any one of their suppliers are violating or infraction of kind of any of these sorts of principles that they have. And she comes up with, the strategy, like how can we avoid these conflict minerals? How can we avoid child labor or suppliers who are employing? And how can we track it? How can we create processes? And she sees this very clearly. Yet people that she works with don't necessarily understand it, don't understand the intricacies. And so it's kind of her job to put it into layman's terms and communicate it in a way. And sometimes she gets pushback. And it's really important that she holds a line and says, no, this is what we can allow. This is what we can't allow, because ultimately it could really come back and reflect negatively. It could be a huge disaster for the company. If there was an infraction and the press got a hold of it, you can only imagine what that would do. And so she too had an outburst in a meeting 5 years ago that she's still holding on to and kind of cringes when she thinks about the way she handled it. But it was required. It was required for her to get the attention of the people that needed to support her, that needed to back her decision. It wasn't that she was out of line. It wasn't that she was misbehaving. It wasn't that she needed to be scolded like she was, 8 years old. She's a grown adult who's leading a business that matters. And that level of clear, confident, affirmative communication meant something. And I don't think that as women, we're programmed to walk around all day, every day at that level. But there are times when it is required of us. And our response is to honor and respect that rather than beat ourselves up. So instead of punishing ourselves for that intensity, that refusal to stay quiet, that same quality, that same fire inside is this real spotlight on the capability and strengths and superpowers that we hold to actually perform and achieve and to shine in these positions where we lead. I just finished a 2.5-day retreat here in the Hudson Valley with the women who belong to my group coaching program called The Connect. And it really was remarkable. On Thursday afternoon, we did spotlight sessions. And if you've never done a spotlight session, you bring a topic that you're working on, something that's bothering you. Perhaps you're feeling stuck on something, and you workshop it in a small group. So these were small groups of 4 women, and everybody had a topic. And it was really remarkable to watch how they workshop it. I'll just give you a few examples. One woman was really struggling with loss of identity. The last 5 years had been difficult for her. She had a job loss, gone through a few kind of filler jobs, none of them she loved. She had been through a divorce and found herself lost in who was she, what had happened over this 5-year span. And she was struggling to remember kind of the badassery, if you will, of who she really had been for the majority of her career, and wondering if she still had what it takes. Another woman is experiencing some significant leadership changes at work and kind of wondering, do I still belong? Why did they hire me? Do I even fit in? I'm not, quote, your cookie cutter type of employee for this role. And when prompted, why did they hire you? She had to think for a minute. And it was really provocative what came out of it and the breakthrough that she had. And the next person had built this business, family business, from nothing to a multi-million-dollar business. And she's now facing some succession planning. And there's complexities in that. There's some grief, there's family dynamics, and how do you make sure that that isn't any sort of personal failure or trap that keeps you stuck when you know that there's another chapter waiting for you, something else to be done? And in all three of these scenarios, there's a common thread of how we turn it on ourselves as though we're the problem, that it's something broken within us. And the shift for that is getting perspective from really respectable women that they could trust and honor their feedback and input, allowed them to have a bit of a paradigm shift, a perspective shift, and say, wow, perhaps there are other angles, other views, other ways to perceive this entire situation. And like fireworks went off. So, I don't think we're really looking at like a kindness gap or a am I enough gap. It's really back to permission. What permission do I need to give myself? What permission do you need to give yourself in order to really empower yourself, to lead, to move, to find your voice? We are so good at giving grace to everyone around us, but can you give grace to yourself? Can you say, hey, that outburst I had actually wasn't even an outburst. It was me protecting and leading the people that I'm responsible for. And that was just me doing the absolute right thing. Way to go. Pat on the back. 2 claps. That grace for others seems to disappear the moment we try to aim it at ourselves. What if we could do better with that? What if we could find a little bit more grace, and all the grace you would extend somebody else, you could just give a fraction of that to yourself? So, on that note, what you're punishing yourself for might be exactly what makes you capable and extraordinary for the work you were built to do. I want you to think about that. Put down the hammer. Pick up the feather. We don't need to punish ourselves. Let's start cheering for one another so that becomes so contagious that we can cheer for ourselves. I'm Lori Pine, the Joy CEO. I am so glad to be doing it with you. If you loved what you heard today, make sure you sign up for my newsletter, share this episode, give me a 5-star review, and I will see you back here next week. Take care, everyone.